all in the pilot and you were not, and you will have to be in last position. I said, well, I'm not going to be very comfortable with that. Then he turned to the casting man who was also in the office. And he said, sign him up and don't pay him too much money.
CBS made 83 episodes of Lost in Space. 80 of them ran the way they were shot. 3 did not. 1 was quietly skipped by local stations on the night it was meant to air. 1 was locked in a studio vault for nearly 30 years, and it cost more than most of a season to make. 1 was carved apart in an editing room before a single viewer saw what was actually filmed. Different reasons, same instinct. Somebody decided America could not be trusted with them. 3 reels, 3 verdicts, and only 1 ever explained out loud. So what was on them? The bandit they couldn't broadcast. By its 3rd season, Lost in Space had drifted far from the survival drama it started as. The Robinsons were no longer rationing water and studying soil samples. They were meeting space Vikings, cosmic gladiators, and planetary warlords in capes. The show had found a tone, and it was loud. Then came the 14th episode of that final season, and the tone found a wall. The installment was titled Castles in Space, a dead world of blue-white ice, wind-moving powder across a soundstage floor, and half buried in it, a structure the crew take for rock, until the light catches an edge too straight to be natural. Inside, sealed in suspended animation, is an ice princess. Dr. Smith, blundering where he is not wanted, thaws her out. Pursuing her across the ice is a silver-skinned bounty hunter called Chavo, played by Alberto Monte under heavy makeup. On paper, it reads like a swashbuckler. On screen, Chavo is something else entirely. He arrives with an exaggerated accent, a gunslinger's swagger and mannerisms lifted from the crudest westerns of the period. The drawled menace played for laughs. At one point, he produces a bottle of tequila and gets the robot drunk to prise information out of him, and the machine wobbles across the ice while the camera holds the joke. That is not a rumor. It is in the finished cut, and it plays exactly as awkwardly today as it sounds. What happened next is where the documented record thins and the collector record takes over. Among longtime fans and episode historians, Castles in Space carries a persistent reputation as the installment some local affiliates declined to carry, substituting films, sports reruns, or news rather than transmit the character into their markets. The claim has been repeated in fan histories for decades. What has never surfaced is a paper trail. No preserved network memo, no affiliate correspondence in any accessible archive confirming a coordinated blackout. So the honest position is this: the caricature is undeniable and was contentious even by the loose standards of mid-60s network television. The blackout story is widely believed, thinly evidenced, and best treated as fan history rather than settled fact. What is easier to verify came afterwards. When the show entered syndication and local channels slotted it into weekday afternoons, Castles in Space kept vanishing from rotations. A programmer building a children's tea time block had every reason to skip a half hour built on an ethnic caricature and a drunk robot, and none to announce it. It was not censorship from above. It was something quieter and, in its way, more final. An episode nobody wanted to be the one to run. That is how a show becomes selectively invisible. Not by decree, but by 100 small local decisions nobody writes down. Subscribe now, because the second reel never reached an affiliate at all. It was locked in a studio vault, and what it cost would have bought most of a season. The vault that swallowed a pilot. $600,000 on a single television pilot in the mid-60s was not ambitious. It was close to reckless. Adjusted for inflation, that is millions committed to 50 minutes of unproven science fiction, made before any network agreed to buy it. Irwin Allen spent it anyway, and he put it where it would show: sweeping matte paintings, mechanical miniatures, full sets, action shot at feature film scale. He understood that a pilot is not really a story. It is a sales pitch with a plot attached. The pilot he delivered was titled No Place to Hide. It was rejected, then placed in a studio vault. where it stayed nearly 3 decades before surfacing for fans. The reason had nothing to do with quality. It had everything to do with tone. No Place to Hide is a genuinely different program. It is a hard-edged survival drama. The crew fly aboard the Gemini 12, a saucer-shaped vessel carrying a pioneer family towards Alpha Centauri. A meteor storm strikes mid-flight. The controls lock, and the ship is thrown off course onto an uncharted world of sub-zero storms and towering Cyclops giants. It treats space with total gravity. There is no wink anywhere in it. Picture the room where that reel was judged. A private screening theater on the lot, network men in the dark. A projector running the most expensive 50 minutes anyone in the building had commissioned that year. Everything in front of them worked. The miniatures held up. The matte paintings sold the distance. The giants moved. And still, somewhere in the middle, the room went quiet in the wrong way. The picture was dark, heavy on technical dialogue, and emotionally cold. Worse, it was missing the two elements that would eventually define the entire franchise. There was no scheming saboteur. There was no environmental control robot. No Dr. Smith. No B9. No danger. Will Robinson. The most quoted line in the show's history did not exist in the version that cost $600,000 to make. Without an antagonist to generate weekly conflict, and without a mechanical companion to supply warmth, the network's fear was simple. The series would be bleak, dry, and frightening in a family slot. They did not scrap it, and they did not air it. They sent Alan back onto the sound stages with a non-negotiable brief. Overhaul the premise, add a covert saboteur, add a robot. The original pilot was sealed away. Sets were altered, new actors hired, and large portions of No Place to Hide were chopped apart and blended with new material to build a lighter, camper premiere. Footage from that reel is still visible inside the early episodes if you know what to look for. A shadow of the serious show, wearing the costume of the silly one. It is one of the genuine hinge points in television history. Air that reel is filmed, and audiences get a grim survival epic about human endurance. Vault it, and you get talking carrots, space pirates, and a pompous doctor in a velour tunic. The network chose the second one. But the man they hired to play the saboteur had ideas of his own, and he began rewriting the show from inside his own performance. The villain who was cut to pieces. The brief was clear. The show needed friction, and friction needed a face. That face belonged to Jonathan Harris, cast as Dr. Zachary Smith in the newly filmed premiere, The Reluctant Stowaway. On paper, Smith was a cold-blooded operative working for a hostile foreign power, sent to sabotage the mission from within. Lethal, humorless, and expendable, a presence who traps the crew in deep space and is killed off within a handful of episodes. The script has him program the environmental control robot to destroy the ship's guidance systems after launch. His own treachery backfires, stranding him aboard as it lifts off. Harris read those pages the way a working character actor reads anything, not for the artistry, but for the arithmetic. He had spent years watching guest villains arrive on a series, threaten the leads for 40 minutes, and leave in a coffin at the end of the act. The question was not whether Smith was well written, it was how many weeks Smith had. The answer, on the page, was very few. A purely evil, static villain on a family program has a shelf life measured in episodes. Every threat Smith made put pressure on the same crack. Sooner or later, the family would have to act, strand him, expel him, or stop writing him into the ship. Every path led to the same place, and it was not a place with Harris in it. So he started changing the performance without asking permission. There was no meeting, no memo proposing a new direction. Harris simply arrived on the soundstage and played a different man. He dropped the low, menacing register of a Cold War agent for something theatrical, cowardly, vain, pompously over-articulated. He put a flutter into the hands. He backed away from danger instead of advancing on it, narrating his own retreat in sentences far too ornate for a man in a corridor. Then he turned on the robot, improvising insults at the machine, alliterative and absurd. delivered with the wounded dignity of a man losing an argument to a household appliance. None of it was in the script. All of it was in the take. Scenes written as life or death threats came back as comedy. The producers found out the way producers always do, in the daily rushes. At the end of a shooting day, the previous day's footage ran for the people paying for it. On the page, that scene was a saboteur menacing a crew. On the screen, a fussy, frightened man was insulting a robot and losing, and the room laughed. That was the moment the show changed hands. Harris had not softened the villain. He had replaced him with something far more useful, a delightfully pathetic, self-serving coward the camera could not leave alone. He was also, by then, unremovable. The footage already existed, and it was good, which created a serious problem one building over. The network had commissioned a survival drama with a dangerous antagonist. What sat on the editing bench was a comic anti-hero. The reluctant stowaway had been shot to the original specification, the cold agent, the calculated sabotage, the lethal intent, while the character in later footage was somebody else entirely. Two incompatible versions of the same show could not run inside one premiere. Whichever survived the cut would define everything after it, so the premiere was rebuilt. Darker dialogue was dubbed over or removed outright. Material presenting Smith as an irredeemable killer was scrubbed from the broadcast master. His actions softened line by line until his presence aboard the ship was survivable for both the plot and the censors. What went out over the air was an assembly, original intent underneath, revised character on top, joins hidden in the mix. The version millions watched is not the version that was filmed. Somewhere between soundstage and transmitter, an assassin was quietly demoted to a nuisance. The man who forced that edit had done it without authorization, from inside a costume, one improvised insult at a time. That is 3 reels, but a fourth near erasure involved no vault and no splice, and it nearly stopped the series before a single frame was exposed. The lawsuit that nearly grounded the Jupiter 2. In December 1962, 3 years before the Robinsons reached CBS, Western Publishing launched a science fiction comic through its Gold Key imprint called Space Family Robinson. It followed a family named Robinson, scientist Craig, his wife June, and their children Tim and Tam, aboard a vessel called the Space Hydro Mansion, thrown off course by a cosmic accident. When CBS announced in late 1964 that it had greenlit a series about a family named Robinson lost in space, Western Publishing's lawyers moved with claims of copyright infringement. The overlap was not subtle. A heroic family adrift in space, the same surname, the same hazards. For a network about to commit millions to primetime science fiction, that was a kill switch. Not an episode pulled after the fact, not a reel in a vault, but the whole series stopped while nothing existed except a budget and a promise. Rather than fight publicly, the parties settled out of court. CBS paid an undisclosed licensing fee for the name and premise. In exchange, Western Publishing gained the right to subtitle its covers, and from issue 15 in 1965, the comic was rebranded Space Family Robinson, Lost in Space, an arrangement letting both trade on the same title without either admitting anything. Allen rarely acknowledged the comic in interviews, preferring to trace the show's lineage to Johann David Weiss's novel, The Swiss Family Robinson. That answer was convenient, and not entirely wrong. It left out the negotiation that made the broadcast possible. Had those talks collapsed in early 1965, the family might have been renamed, or the series shelved before it reached an aerial. Instead, the show survived every attempt to stop it, and the compromises forced on it turned out to be worth a fortune. The accident that built an empire. Everything that made Lost in Space enormous came from what the network had already taken away from it. The vaulted pilot removed the grim survival drama. The recut premiere removed the assassin. What remained was a lighter, character-driven show with a comic villain at its center, and it arrived in September 1965, as NASA's Gemini program dominated front pages worldwide. Allen understood the audience was not waiting to be persuaded. The visual presentation set a new bar for broadcast television, using miniatures built by effects veteran L.B. Abbott and elaborate sound stages built to pass as alien worlds. The Jupiter 2 itself, a two-deck saucer with glowing panels, a hydraulic lift, and cryogenic sleep pods, cost tens of thousands of dollars and gave the show a weight most television of the period could not afford. The first season, shot in black and white, kept a dramatic edge, and the ratings were an immediate win for CBS. Then, in early 1966, ABC launched Batman, and the industry recalibrated around Pop Art Camp overnight. CBS and Allen answered in kind. From Season 2, Lost in Space moved into saturated Technicolor. Shadow and dust gave way to neon, environmental hazards to space pirates and intergalactic circuses. The center of gravity shifted too, from ensemble drama to a showcase for three performers: Harris, Bill Mumy as prodigy Will Robinson, and stuntman Bob May inside the B-9 robot suit. That was the camp pivot the network had effectively ordered 2 years earlier by locking away the serious version, and it is what made the show sellable off-screen. Allen noticed children were not simply watching, they were fixated on the hardware. The lasers, the gadgets, the mechanical monsters a grim survival drama would never have produced. Remco led the licensing wave with motorized B-9 robots, laser pistols, and miniature Jupiter 2 craft, and the battery-operated robot with its flashing dome became one of the most sought-after gifts of 1966. The 1967 dome-top metal lunchbox from King Sealy Thermos, showing the family facing a one-eyed Cyclops, is now among the most valuable vintage lunchboxes in television history. Topps issued a 55-card bubblegum set from first season stills, and Marx produced playsets with alien landscapes and silver suits. Behind the scenes, it was punishing work. The cast performed under scorching lights in heavy synthetic suits, and May spent hours sealed inside the robot shell with barely any ventilation. More than a decade before Star Wars rewrote film merchandising in 1977, a show assembled from vaulted footage and emergency re-edits had proved a science fiction universe could earn more off the screen than on it. The money outlasted the program. So did the people inside the suits, though not in the ways the audience expected. What the critics got wrong. Guy Williams played Mission Commander John Robinson, arriving as an established star from Disney's Zorro. As the series tilted towards Smith and Will, his screen time shrank, and his frustration was well documented. After cancellation in 1968, he stepped away from acting and settled in Buenos Aires, where Zorro had made him a national figure, living quietly until his death in 1989. June Lockhart, a Tony winner already famous from Lassie, played Maureen Robinson, worked prolifically for decades, and became an advocate for space exploration and NASA education programs. Jonathan Harris remade the part he was hired for, stayed the entire series, formed a lasting fatherly friendship with Bill Mumy, and worked in animation voice acting until his death in 2002. Mumy became a musician, voice actor, and comic book writer, and starred as Lenier in Babylon 5. Mark Goddard played pilot Don West, later earned a master's in education and taught for decades before his death in 2023. Marta Kristen and Angela Cartwright, the latter already known as Brigida in The Sound of Music, built careers in photography, design, writing, and acting. The robot was two men, Bob May inside the suit, announcer Dick Tufeld supplying the voice, including the warning that outlived the program. When the series ended in spring 1968, critics filed the obituary quickly. The pivot from hard science fiction to camp was treated as decline, a show that opened with survival stakes and closed with talking vegetables and celestial pirates. The reviews were not unfair on their own terms. They were simply measuring the wrong thing. What critics filed as cheap camp, families watched as shared escapism, monsters for the children, theatrical wit for the adults, and a steady message that the Robinsons faced every crisis as a unit. Syndication settled it. Stripped across weekday afternoons from the early 70s, the show found a new generation, and Danger, Will Robinson, entered the language permanently. A 1998 feature film, comics, toy lines, and a Netflix series followed, several making room for surviving cast members, which brings it back to the 3 reels. All 3 were pulled, buried, or rebuilt because someone decided in advance that audiences would not accept them. In every case, what audiences accepted instead was the messier thing that replaced it. If this was worth your time, subscribe. There are more untold stories waiting in the archives of classic television. And leave a comment: the grim Lost in Space CBS, Locked in the Vault, or the camp classic the world actually got.